Okay, once again, welcome to our channel. Today we go back to the old subject, Brexit. Why are we talking about Brexit today? Reason is the current development in global politics and the conversation that is currently going on in relations to President Zelensky in the White House, the Oval Office, and his obviously conversation between him, Donald Trump, and Vice President Vance. There was that talk that this man was bullied in the Oval Office. Others, in looking at the footage again, especially the black belt barrister who makes a great analysis of this conversation in assessing whether President Zelensky was bullied or not, came up with some interesting findings. And so we see that the demeanor and the body language of President Zelensky, his attire in appearing in the Oval Office, in consideration to the resources and the support that the United States of America have given Ukraine, and also the European Union, including Britain, have given President Zelensky, it appears that maybe he wasn't necessarily bullied, but maybe he was basically facing the music and facing up to reality, and obviously the cost and the sacrifices that a nation needs to make, a nation that is at war. And so this is what brings us back to the subject of Brexit, because on the 23rd of June 2016, Britain voted to be out of the European Union, to take back control of its borders and its sovereignty, and basically disengage from the Union. This surely damaged relations with the Europeans, i.e. in terms of access to trade, in terms of the free movement of people, accessing jobs in Europe, living in Europe, and just a bad taste of some sort of a superiority complex in the whole process, and really causing some degree of embarrassment if obviously a Brit now met European Union members. Somehow this was a journey, so one didn't know where it was going to go. So there was that, how do I say it, that hope that this whole Brexit thing was going to work well in our favor. The vote, as we know, was a 52% out, 48% in. So we question whether indeed this was adequate enough for such a major decision to be made in Britain, a decision that sort of affect the generation now and the future generation and young people. And so when we look at the analysis of this graph, or this last poll, which says, in hindsight, do you think Britain was right or wrong to vote to leave the European Union? This is done in January 2025. And so when we look at this graph, the analysis shows that obviously come to sort of January 2020, these two lines, the deeper line, the darker blue line, is those who think it was wrong to leave the Union, and the blue line is those who thought it was right to basically leave the European Union, obviously the light blue line shows those who felt it was right to leave the European Union, and the darker blue is those who felt it was wrong to leave the European Union. So come up to, say, January to March 2021, you can see that those who felt that it was right to leave the European Union, the lighter blue line, was relatively higher. And then obviously as the years went by, come up to, say, July 2024, the gap between these two groups have really widened whereby most people believe that it was a wrong idea to leave the union. And so one would say this was a bit of a journey in the sense that when it was starting, people could see the advantages of, say, taking control of our borders, limiting immigration, doing business elsewhere, with other nations, and just not being restricted by the union, being in that club, and also taking control of our laws and our judiciary system and our total sovereignty. But you can see that as we progress in the years, Britain or British people begin to see that this may not necessarily be the case, or it has not been so advantageous leaving the union. Now, we see that with the position that American President Donald Trump is taking in this, in his relations or in his communication with President Zelensky, urging NATO to take a much bigger responsibility in providing a bigger budget and basically supporting Ukraine in this war. We see that this has now somehow begun to enhance relations between British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the European leaders of the European Union, currently probably the most influential being the President of France. So we are seeing that sort of a relationship now that America seems to be sort of pulling away or distancing itself from the European Union. We see that it seems that the European Union needs Britain, or Britain also needs the European Union more. And so we are saying, was Brexit such a good idea? Is it good that we re-establish relations with the European Union? It's maybe impossible for anybody to think that British people want to go back into the union or vote to go back into the union. But at the moment, the only option that they may be available is enhancing the relationship with our European neighbors. So we open up this conversation once again for this conversation to be debated. Are you with me? For people to come in and express their opinion to see where we are with this European Union issue and Brexit. So in this, obviously in this poll, it says that as of January 2025, 55% of people in Britain thought that it was wrong to leave the European Union, compared to 30% who thought it was right. It was the right decision. During this time period, the share of people who regret Brexit have been slightly higher than those who support it, except for some polls in spring 2021, which showed higher levels of support for Brexit. The share of people who don't know whether Brexit was the right or wrong decision has generally been stable and usually range between 11 and 14%. So we see is Brexit setting in. Since late July 2022, the share of people who regret Brexit in these surveys have consistently been about 50%. Additionally, a survey from January 2025 highlighted that most people in the United Kingdom thought that Brexit had had a mainly negative impact, especially on the cost of living and the economy, despite there being a clear majority of voters who now regret Brexit. There is as yet no particular future relationship with the EU that has overwhelming support. As of late 2023, 31% of Britons wanted to rejoin the EU, while 30% merely wanted to improve trade relations and not to rejoin either the EU or the single market. Leave victory in 2016 defied the polls. in the actual referendum, which took place on June 23rd, 2016, Leave won 51.9% of the vote and remained 48.1%. After several polls in the run-up to the referendum put Remain slightly ahead. Remain were anticipated to win until early results from the Northeast England suggested that Leave had performed far better than expected. With this pattern replicated throughout the country, the event was repeatedly somewhat in the US elections of that year, which saw Donald Trump win several key swing states such as Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, despite prediction that these states would vote for Hillary Clinton. It's kind of quite great that they can do these type of comparisons, but the reality is that was 51.9%, which is less than 52%, good enough for such a change that affects the future generations of the people of this country, United Kingdom? Was it necessary for the country to have acted to leave on a vote less than 52%? So we come here to ascertain what on what basis does, for example, the US use for constitutional amendment or constitutional change. This gives us a fairly good idea to ascertain if the decision of a 51 or a 52% to a 48%, was it good enough? So under US Constitution, if there is any constitutional amendment, what is required for a change is a 2/3, which is a 60% of both the House of Representatives and the Senate. So this is what is needed for a change, for a constitutional change to occur. With that in mind, you also need 3/4 of ratification of such constitutional change or constitutional amendments from the state or from the state legislature for such a change to occur. Now, Brexit in itself was big enough. It was a big enough issue that could be equated to US constitutional change. And so that makes it very clear that if this thing had actually happened in the United States, they would have still, assuming that they were Britain, they would have still remained in the European Union, because 51.9% wouldn't have been adequate or nothing near to the 2/3 or 60% vote that would have been required to begin the process. Then you also have a 3/4 or 75% of the legislature of the states to agree, or there's a 3/4 of the states ratification to have then ignite or engage or activate the Brexit. So here there is a problem. So we are going to look at some of the arguments that were used, obviously, for the Brexit, and to open that debate if these arguments, as it stands now, 5 years into the date of activation, are these arguments holding water. So, for example, one of the key areas was about taking back control. So, as we see here, the public voted to take back control. This government has delivered it. Our objective has been to restore the UK status as a sovereign, independent country so that we can once again determine our own future. That means changing our rules and regulations to best serve the people's priority and returning democracy, accountability to our institutions. So has this been the case? We then ask ourselves that question: in this world that we live in, is any particular nation really, really sovereign or totally independent in itself? Or can any nation stand in isolation for any reason? The answer is probably a no. So this is very evident that now that we see Donald Trump's inward approach of keeping or making America first in all things, and basically trying to distance himself from NATO, or trying to cut his own public expenditure to maybe activities that is not really US centered, we see that Europeans seems to need Britain, and Britain also need the Europeans to actually come together to form that strong alliance again in NATO. So this has been very evident in Keir Starmer's relations to the France president, who is quite influential at the moment in Europe, because he's probably one of the longest and current serving presidents in mainland Europe. So here we are. Then we talk about the rules, or taking control of our legislature, and also the courts, basically our judiciary systems, and also accountability. So when we look at things to do with the judiciary systems, we find out a clear demonstration that our judiciary is not as independent as we thought it will be, based on parliamentary supremacy. So this was actually demonstrated in the government Rwanda scheme, when the Supreme Court ruled that Rwanda was not a safe country. But we see that Rishi Sunak, in his majority or Tory majority in the parliament, used parliamentary supremacy to overturn the power of the judiciary. So this then questions that judiciary independence, which was also used as an argument for Britain to distance itself from Strasbourg. So ended free movement and taking back control of our borders. In its place, we have introduced a point-based immigration system focused on skilled worker and the best global talents, with skills and salary thresholds and an English language requirement. The UK has welcomed thousands of workers with the skills the country needs to support our domestic labor market as we build back better from the COVID pandemic, from doctors and scientists to butchers and bricklayers. So this is also questionable. This argument here is also questionable, in the sense that this skilled worker scheme or system was basically mainly exploiting people from different countries, i.e. from India, from Africa. In reality, you want the Europeans to go, those that are near to you, those that probably understands European culture or are nearer to Britain, to go away, and then you bring in people from elsewhere, which eventually turned out to be a bit of a challenge. There were huge labor shortages in these key areas, and a real struggle of the system. However, you have your opinion, you can make your opinion known if overall this has been a great thing. Let's carry on and look at some of the points that were raised here. Okay, so restore democratic control over our law making. We have the power to make and scrutinize the laws that applies to us back to our parliament and the devolved parliament, so that they are now made in Belfast, Cardiff, Edinburgh and London and not Brussels. So once again, this was a nice idea that was sold to people, but in reality, you know, you are making so many laws. So literally, the parliament can vote on anything and just come up with a bill, and with a majority in any particular political party, laws can be made that may not necessarily be in the interest of the nation and its people. These laws can be made in the interest of political parties and political interest and vested interest if they have the majority in parliament. And so you are not getting a great degree of checks and balances. But when you are in the European Union, just it becomes difficult to just make laws anyhow as you wish. But they then somehow serve as a control over what we can do, to the best interests of the people. And so this also is another debatable issue. Restore the Supreme Court as the final arbiter of law that applies in the UK. UK judges sitting in UK courts now determine the law of the land in the UK with judgments issued in English, not in French. So all this is a kind of a talk that can really inspire people to walk away from the union. However, in reality, as I explained earlier, we realize that parliamentary supremacy overtakes or overrules the UK Supreme Court, which was demonstrated by Rishi Sunak under the government Rwanda scheme when he rejected the Supreme Court's ruling that Rwanda was a safe country and was able to get the Rwanda bill into law because of the majority that he had in parliament. And even he was able to also push the House of Lords to actually let him have his way. But eventually, we realized that there was a lot of waste of taxpayers' money. The Rwanda flight never really took off, and Britain lost a fair amount of money to Rwanda for this scheme. Has there been accountability? That is another question for another day. So once again, let us know what you think, what your opinion is. Then we go to the next one, which says, made it tougher for EU criminals to enter the UK. EU nationals sentenced to a year or more in jail will now be refused entry to the UK. Under EU free movement, we had to allow some foreign criminals into the country who would otherwise have been stopped and turned away. We have now brought back the rules of the EU criminals who are not protected by the withdrawal agreement in line with other foreign criminals. So this, once again, is questionable. Nice thing to talk about, but in practice, is that the case? Do we not still have a fair amount of criminals? If they are not from the EU, they are from elsewhere, and they are actually in this country. So this, once again, is another issue to debate. So could this be that all these things, as we begin to realize how ineffective they have been, could then have been the trend of that regret that most Brits are having, which is actually showing a poll that is constantly over 50% not in favor of our exiting the European Union. Then we go next and say, ended the acceptance of ID cards for most EU nationals traveling to the UK. Some ID cards are amongst the least secure documents seen at the borders and are, as a rule, not as secure as corresponding national passport. We have already seen a dramatic drop in encounters of fraudulent ID cards at the border. So once again, this is also debatable on the basis of what we stop the Europeans from doing, they also stop us from doing. So we see maybe in some of our previous videos, we look at the, is it the it's ATIAS, yes, which is, you know, this fingerprints and biometric scanning of the eye and fingerprints when entering and leaving the European Union by Brits. So these restrictions, as we impose on the Europeans, they also impose on us. We also see, which I've personally experienced in recent times when I have posted items to some relatives in mainland Europe. Previously, I'll post items and they will receive it in 3-4 days, easily trackable and stuff. In recent times or since Brexit, when I've actually endeavored to post any item, I pay a hell of a lot in postal cost here. And then when those items gets into mainland Europe, they end up in the depot in those countries and they don't move forward. Why? Because the Europeans are demanding further payments before they release these items to whoever they are sent to. So there are issues also with the postal systems. Bureaucracies are on the rise, whereby now things are not as straightforward. So take back control of our waters. The deal we struck with the EU and our new Fisheries Act allow us to chart a course once again as an independent coastal state, bringing more quota for British fishermen and new opportunities for coastal communities from Lerwick and Peterhead at the northeast end of Scotland to Wrexham and Newlyn at the southwestern tip of England. Now, I am not a fisherman, so I wouldn't be able to comment on this. So those that are into fishing can also come in and say what their opinion is. Restoring fair access to our welfare system. We ended the preferential treatment of EU migrants over our non-EU migrants, ensuring that whenever people are born, those who choose to make the UK their home pay into the system for a reasonable period of time before they can access the benefits of it. And so, yes, here there is an argument. I think there was a great deal of a burden, or of maybe people that were coming from other European countries into Britain and how much it was costing Britain. There was that knowledge that even their families back home were being given benefits. And so this plays a huge pressure on UK finances and probably was used as one of the key debates for Brexit. But all this, Britain didn't necessarily have to pay these people social welfare and even support their families back home. Other European Union countries have ways of verifying if people that are coming into those nations had done enough work in their own home nations to be able to qualify for benefits in those respective European nations. And if they did find out that a person had not done enough in their own country, then they could then be refused benefits within those European countries. So Britain could have actually adopted the same type of a system, and so could have then controlled how much they were paying out. Set our own tariff regimes via UK global tariffs. So that could also be a good thing for trade. But once again, it does have its own other drawbacks. and people that are in the trade will be able to debate on this and obviously share their opinion of what things have been since the 5 years of our exiting the European Union. Our new UK global tariff is more tailored to the needs of the UK economy and denominated in pounds, not in euros. We streamline and simplify new 6,000 tariff lines, lowering costs for businesses by reducing administrative burden, scrap thousands of unnecessary tariff variations on products, and expand tariff-free trade by eliminating tariffs on a wide range of products. So this is also an interesting point. However, in my own knowledge in international law and international trade, you find out that the World Trade Organization does have, extensive tariff measures which affects the UK and other countries of the world and also the European Union. However, what you tend to find that when you are in the Union, because your market share is very large and you are powerful in a way, you were then having some benefits with the World Trade Organization rather than going it alone. So, experts in the World Trade Organization and how tariffs are actually applied by the WTO globally can actually analyze this particular point and demonstrate if indeed we are beneficial in any way. Obviously, going it alone. We are committed to a 150 million pound to modernize and streamline our imports and export controls by creating the single trade window. This will support our ambition to make UK the most efficient border in the world by 2025 and reduce the cost of trade by streamlining trader reaction with the UK border agencies. We see the cost of everything go up. We have seen since Brexit and obviously with COVID, we have seen prices of goods and services just skyrocket. There are times that prices are increased so much so that you ask yourself, is there any regulation in the UK? So, for example, I'll make an example. You go to UK car parks, airport car parking before COVID and also Brexit. You drive into Heathrow maybe for about £3.50 for an hour, and then later on it was like 30 minutes, and then these prices just kept going up and up and up, such that now when you enter Heathrow for 0 to 29 minutes, you probably pay about £7.90. In an hour, you probably pay between 11 to £15. When you enter Stansted Airport, just to drop off somebody is £7. If you are picking up somebody, you literally go into the orange car park and in and out, you pay £10. If you stay there for more than 30 minutes, this thing is just going to go up and up and up and up. And it's absolutely ridiculous. So you ask yourself the question, is there regulation in the UK? So this will be the next point, giving UK regulators the ability and the resource to make sovereign decisions about globally significant mergers. Decisions about global significant mergers and acquisitions are now made by the UK Competition and Market Authority, given the ability to block or remedy mergers it considers will harm the UK customer, like S&P Global Acquisitions. So these are all matters relating to finance, the finance sector and the banking sector. But what we are concerned about is the day-to-day. Walking into that supermarket, they increasing price willy-nilly. There was stuff that you buy for, say, a turkey that you buy, which was packaged for £4.90. You go back the next day and it's £6.50. So you're looking at what is the justification for this astronomical price increases? How do you justify it? Are these regulated? We do not know. In more recent times, the most expensive thing or service to use is basically charging your electric vehicles. They are extremely expensive. And so, these are just tough times. And we are asking that question. Was it right for Britain to have come out of the European Union? Now that it's done already, there isn't much that can be done to reverse it. However, could we improve our relations with our European Union partners to enhance relations, to help younger people to be able to go in and out of Europe, to pursue careers, and to also enjoy holidays and to enjoy living in a European nation? Now, some of the drawbacks that we basically put across is that, are you richer or poorer since Brexit? So this is also an issue. I mean, once again, there are reports which I'm going to go into. I think at this stage, I will suspend going further and probably look at this aspect of Brexit in our next video. But in the meantime, I will look at the idea whether we are richer or poorer in this EU business. I definitely saw something here which I think I should share with you. Okay. Right. Okay. So yes, I've not been able to access this this document that I wanted to actually show you. And once again, this is to do with data which actually question whether we are richer or poorer since Brexit. The data shows that people or families were worse off £2,000 a year as of 2023, and this is actually increased to 3,400 in 2024 and continue to rise. And so in reality, we are no better off in this pursuit of Brexit. But in view of the developments in the world, we want to find out from you what you are thinking. We want you to engage in the debate. So these are some of the points that I'm going to quickly run through on the pros and cons of Brexit, and bring this video to a close. So advantages and disadvantages of Brexit. So Brexit, the term used to describe the United Kingdom withdrawal from the European Union, has been one of the most significant political and economic events in recent history. The UK officially left the EU on January 31st, 2020, following years of intense negotiation and debate. Brexit has brought a mix of opportunity and challenges which continues to shape the future of the UK. This article explores the various advantages and disadvantages of Brexit, highlighting its multifaceted impact on the nation. So when we look at some of the advantages, it talks about our sovereignty. Maybe we covered some of these in the other document that we looked at. So sovereignty, one of the prime advantages of Brexit is the restoration of sovereignty. By leaving the EU, the UK regained full control over its laws, regulations and policies, free from jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice. This allows the UK to make independent decisions in areas such as trade, immigration, domestic legislation without external influences. For many Brexit supporters, this reassertion of national sovereignty was a crucial factor in their support for leaving the EU. Now, this is a brilliant, you can see how this would have sold well at the time of Brexit. But then as we move on in the years, we realize that the control that this nation has gained has not, or maybe politicians or people in power have not used these controls that the nation have gained in the best interest of the people of the nation. And probably it has been for vested interest and people in powerful places getting richer and richer, and those that are at the bottom getting poorer and poorer because the individual have lost basically a great deal of their rights through new legislation that is pushing people further down the wealth chart. And so immigration control, Brexit has provided UK with the ability to establish immigration policy and control its borders more effectively. The UK government can now design immigration rule that aligns with the national priorities, potentially addressing public concerns about immigration levels and ensuring that visas are allocated based on the country's specific economic social needs. So these are all fantastic arguments. However, it's just its practicality that have a great deal of shortcomings. Trade flexibility. Another advantage of Brexit is the flexibility it offers the UK in negotiating trade deals outside the EU. UK can negotiate bilateral trade agreements with countries around the world, potentially securing deals that are much more tailored to its economic interests. This could open up new markets for UK businesses and reduce dependency on the EU market. So these are all fantastic ideas on paper. It is the practicality, the shortcomings of its practicality that is under fire. The UK departure from EU allows it to develop its regulations, which could lead to a reduction in bureaucracy red tape. This regulatory freedom could make the UK a more attractive environment for businesses, fostering innovation and competitiveness, particularly in sectors like technology and finance. Once again, great argument. But the reality is that you need certain aspects of markets to be regulated. Otherwise, you see extensive price increment without justification and without any control. So it becomes a jungle free for all. People do whatever it is that they want, and nobody really goes round to check on them. But when you are in the union, then there are standards, and issues are policed. And so there you go. Financial savings. Brexit has also resulted in financial savings for the UK, as no longer contributes to the EU budget. The funds previously sent to EU can now be redirected to national priorities such as healthcare, infrastructure, or education, potentially boosting public services and investment. In reality, these things have not happened. The NHS continues to struggle in relations to resources and also even staffing. And so these are all debatable issues. Fishing rights, these are all issues for people that are in agricultural policy and fishing, they can answer. So then it goes on: innovation and growth, national identity. But let's look at some of the disadvantages. Economic uncertainty. One of the most significant disadvantages of Brexit has been the economic uncertainty it has created. The decision to leave the EU has affected investment, business confidence, and financial market. The long-term economic impact remains unclear as the UK continues to navigate its new relationship with the EU and other global partners. I mean, so this is where once again, um, I am not siding with any particular argument here. When we look at the issue of economic uncertainty, I don't necessarily think that there has been that much of economic uncertainty. The UK economy, as far as I can see, is growing. There's a lot of business activity. Maybe in recent times, as Keir Starmer took over as Prime Minister, and the enhanced relations between Britain and the EU has somehow boosted the UK economy. That I can actually say from observation. 2020, late 2024 into 2025, there is a lot of economic activity in the United Kingdom. Restaurants are booming. All aspects of trade is just booming. So that in itself, one can say that there is a fair amount of certainty, but that is based on the basis that Keir Starmer is beginning to enhance his relations with the European Union nations. Trade barriers. Leaving the EU single market and common union has introduced a new trade barrier, including tariffs and customs check. These barriers can increase cost and reduce trade efficiency, particularly for businesses that rely on seamless access to the European market. That added complexity of control cross-border trade has also led to delays and disruption in supply chains. Absolutely on the dollar on that one. It is true. These barriers are not helping supply chains and causing a great deal of problems. Loss of market access. And I will say people are a lot poorer now. Obviously, the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. But probably the poor are the majority that are losing resources to the rich. And so the EU was in a way helping in reducing the disparity between the rich and the poor in the United Kingdom. Loss of market access. UK businesses have lost the seamless access they once enjoyed to the European market, which was the largest trading partner for many sectors. This loss of market access could lead to a reduced export potential, losses in revenue, and diminished market shares, particularly for industries that depend heavily on EU trade. So that is also a true statement. Regulatory divergence. As the UK and the EU develop separate regulatory framework, businesses operating in both markets may face complications and additional costs. Differences in regulations can create barriers to trade and increase the burden on companies that needs to comply with multiple sets of rules. True. Labor market impacts. Restriction on the movement of people have led to labor shortages in sectors such as healthcare, agriculture, hospitality, which previously relied on EU workers. These shortages have put pressure on these industries, potentially leading to higher costs and reduced service levels. So there's a great deal of truth in this. So this is where you brought in the skilled worker scheme, and there's basically creaming of money from poor nations that are sending their people over. The cost of them engaging in this scheme, I personally have come across people that have come and have actually regretted that they ever did. Then we look at financial services. The UK financial services sector, a crucial part of its economy, faces uncertainty due to Brexit. The potential loss of businesses as firms relocate to maintain access to the EU markets could have significant implications for the UK economic stability and global financial standing. That I beg to differ. I don't necessarily agree to that. The city of London is doing absolutely fine, and the prediction of a mass exodus of city traders and these guys that are making money in the city has not necessarily been a reality. So the city continues to hold its position as a giant in financial markets or financial services in this side of the world. Investment decline, I once again disagree with that. That has not necessarily been the case. There is still a great deal of investment coming in from other parts of the world into the United Kingdom. Political divisions, yes. Brexit has deepened political divisions within the UK, exacerbating tensions between different regions and groups with varying views on the issue. These divisions have manifested in political instability, social unrest, and ongoing debates about the future direction of the country. There is an element of truth in that. Obviously, Greater London being more Remain. Yeah, that's right. Greater London is a more Remain zone, and obviously other areas that we live and the tensions that there is or there are. And so, yes, but I think there's a more political division, should I say, between Britain and the EU zone, in just that really calls for the need to enhance relations. So administrative burden, the transition from EU regulation to domestic regulation has required significant administrative adjustment and resource. This administrative burden has strained government capacity and created challenges in effectively managing the regulatory shift, particularly in areas like trade, immigration, and environmental policy. So, it's a great deal of truth in this one on the basis of, especially on the legal side of things. I don't think the nation had prepared itself legally. The legal infrastructure was not in place to engage Brexit, because once we got into it, we realized that there was a gap in addressing related legal issues. I think it was well underestimated, the amount of legal work that was required. Now, has that really expanded the legal industry in the United Kingdom? I do not know. So those in the legal sector can also make their comments if they think that these changes have obviously increased employee intake in the legal sector. Northern Ireland and border issues. Brexit has complicated the issue of border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Maintaining an open border while exiting the EU has created complex and contentious issues impacting political stability, trade, and the peace process in Northern Ireland. Brexit has brought advantages and disadvantages to the UK, with its impact being felt across various sectors and aspects of society. while the restoration of sovereignty, control over immigration, and the potential for new trade deals offer significant opportunity, the economic uncertainty, trade barriers, and political divisions present considerable challenges. The long-term effect of Brexit will depend on how the UK navigate these issues, adapt new circumstances, and capitalizes on the opportunity that arise in its post-EU future. So great, yeah. There were obviously, or there are still issues with the EU, obviously the Brexit, and also how Northern Ireland and mainland Ireland, how the border is controlled, because obviously Northern Ireland and main Ireland is one landmass, and they want to have their free movement, you know, within that region. But at the same time, you're Brexit, and Ireland is a member of the European Union, and so there has been complications on that border. Do you erect a border, or do you leave that section to be borderless and for people to move freely from northern to southern Ireland? So this has been the challenge. But this topic is not going to go away. We are going to have more videos as we delve deeper into the subject. We encourage you to add your contributions, say what you think. Let's open up this debate. Let's not brush it under the carpet, but bring it to the fore, debate it. Ask the question: if 52% was sufficient for this nation to have exited the European Union, what impact does this decision have on the youth, on young people that are up and coming, seeking to have a wider network of opportunity with its European neighbors? How do you rectify the difference? Do you go back and enhance relations, or do you put yourself back into Europe, or vote yourself back into it? It is hard to believe that that will ever happen, but I think that the need to enhance our relations with our European Union and creating an opportunity for people to move freely between these countries, between mainland Europe and the United Kingdom, and also enhancing that opportunity for people that wishes to live in mainland Europe to do so in a more easier and less bureaucratic way could be a good idea. How do we address the issue of the postal systems and the postal delays between Britain and its European Union nations? How do we somehow rebuild our relations so that we don't appear to suffer from that superiority complex issue? These are all questions that we implore you to engage in and try to answer. Thank you once again for watching our channel. Until our next video, have a wonderful evening.